Welcome to Echoes of Ihsan. Today we're diving into something that everyone kind of deals with, right? It's wills and testaments.
Hmm.
But we're going to be looking at it through the lens of Islamic tradition.
Hmm.
So it's almost like, how does this major world religion look at the idea of legacy? Like what you pass on,
Right.
and inheritance and all that.
Yeah.
So the source we're using is Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 4. It's basically teachings and sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, and it's super interesting. Gives you a real window into like the values of that early Islamic society.
And it's funny you use the word legacy because that's really what we're going to be like unpacking here.
Okay.
In Islam, a will isn't just some legal paper. It's way more than just like who gets what after you die. It's connected to this whole way of ethical living, social responsibility, like how what you do keeps affecting things even after you're gone.
Okay, so there's more to it than meets the eye. What makes the Islamic approach to wills different? Like, what are some things that might surprise us when we dig into these hadiths?
One of the first things you'll see is how important family is. Like those ties are sacred.
Okay.
Breaking those ties, especially with your close family, that's a major sin. Could even be serious enough to keep you out of paradise.
Wow, that's serious. So if you, like, have a huge fight with your family,
It's not that straightforward.
Okay.
You got to remember that Islamic teachings always look at the context, the
Oh.
bigger picture of a person's life. Hadith 1909, it says, "The one who severs ties will not enter paradise."
Right.
But the scholars explaining it make it clear this is talking about the ties of the womb, those like core family bonds.
I see.
And even then, they recognize that things happen. You can have like really tough situations. At the end of the day, what you do, good or bad, that's what matters. It's about trying to have strong family connections, but also, forgiveness and making up are huge in the faith.
Right, so it's not about being perfect. It's about the effort. And knowing family stuff can be messy.
Yeah, exactly. They get that human part of it.
Yeah.
And this idea of connection goes beyond just your immediate family. You've got Hadith 1921, where the Prophet Muhammad talks about how important it is to respect your elders and to like show love to kids.
Yeah, it's that whole it takes a village thing. Lots of cultures value that connection between generations.
Totally. And the commentary on this Hadith is like, this respect and care are central to Islam, to its very fabric.
Yeah.
It's all about being connected. You got a community where the young learn from and take care of the old, and the old guide and nurture the young. It's this like cycle of support.
I wonder if in modern society we kind of forget about that sometimes, Like we're so busy with individual success and families are spread out everywhere.
You're right. That's a really important point. It makes you think, how do we keep those values of respect and care alive in a world that's always moving so fast and where everyone's kind of isolated?
So get family ties, respecting elders, anything else in these hadith about how a Muslim should live their life that really jumps out?
There's this beautiful idea that runs through Islamic teachings. You see it in the Hadith about wills, too. It's about showing mercy, not just to people, but to everything that's alive.
Wait, everything, you mean like animals too? Like becoming vegetarian or something?
It's not really about the food you eat. Hadith 1924 says that showing mercy to every living thing, people, animals, even the environment, it's a way to get God's mercy. It's a way bigger view of the world.
That's pretty powerful. It's like saying we have a responsibility to the whole planet, not just ourselves.
Exactly. If you think that God's mercy is for everything he created, your actions should show that. You got to recognize that everything that lives is connected.
So it's not just about what you leave behind for your family and your will. It's about how you treated the world while you were here. It's a deep way to think about legacy.
It really is. And this brings us to another interesting concept in Islam. It's called nasiha. You see it in Hadith 1925. It's sometimes translated as sincere advice, but it's like way deeper.
How is this ayah different from just giving someone advice?
It's about truly wanting the best for another Muslim, offering guidance with kindness and honesty, even when it's hard. Like, imagine giving advice where you really care about how the other person turns out, even if it means saying something they don't want to hear.
It's kind of like tough love, but with more empathy.
You got it. It's about wanting what's best for them, even if it's not what they want to hear right now. And it's not just on the person giving the advice, it's also about the person getting it. They got to be open and listen humbly.
I think we could all use a bit more nos here, right? Especially now when everyone's got an opinion. But real care and advice is hard to find.
No doubt. It takes trust, respect, and a shared desire to grow.
So we've been talking about these big ideas of how a Muslim should live, but how do they actually play out in wills and testaments? Where does the individual fit into this whole web of family and community?
That's where Hadith 1929 comes in. It says you can't violate another Muslim's honor, wealth, or blood.
So it's like drawing a line, saying this is the limit.
Yeah, that's it. The scholars are really clear that crossing those lines is a huge deal. This idea highlights how important life and possessions are within the Muslim community. It's about setting boundaries, but also remembering that each person, even within a community, has rights and deserves protection.
It's interesting how these old teachings kind of line up with modern ideas about human rights. It's like they were laying the groundwork for a fair and just society way back then.
That's a great observation. There's definitely a connection there. And it leads us to another hadith that gives us a peek into how society worked back then, but also shows this universal idea of justice. Hadith 1947 talks about the master-slave relationship that was around in Prophet Muhammad's time.
This might get a little,
You got to be careful and understand the history. While this hadith recognizes that master-slave thing existed, it tells masters to treat their slaves like brothers, to provide for them and make sure they're okay.
So even in a system we see as wrong today, there's this push for fairness and compassion, like trying to make the best of a bad situation.
You got it. The scholars point out that this reflects the Islamic idea of justice, even in a social structure we don't accept anymore. It reminds us that even in messed up systems, we can be kind and recognize that all people share the same humanity.
Powerful message, right? Even when the system itself was, not good, there's this attempt to bring in humanity. To be fair, it makes you think, like, progress isn't always a straight line, is it?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about pushing for better treatment within a system, even while you're trying to change the system itself.
That's a really good point. And it makes you think about how we can do that today, too, with the injustices we see.
Exactly. It asks us, where can we be advocates for fairness and compassion, even within systems that we might want to change completely?
Right, right. So we've talked about these big ethical ideas in Islam, like kinship, respect for all life, this nasiha thing, and even fighting for justice in imperfect systems. But let's get to the actual inheritance part. Like, what do these hadiths say about how Muslims should handle wills and, money being passed down? Well, Hadith 2097, it lays down a basic principle. It's about giving the right portions of inheritance, especially to daughters. It says that after those shares are taken care of, whatever's left goes to the closest male relative.
That part about the closest male relative, does that mean daughters weren't seen as equal heirs?
You gotta remember the historical and cultural context here.
Okay.
The scholars explaining this hadith say that while daughters did get a share, how it was divided up, the specifics, they could change. Like how many heirs there were, their relationship to the person who died, even the type of property, it all played a part.
So it wasn't automatically about favoring men over women?
Not really, no. One of the main goals was to make sure family members were financially secure, especially those who might be vulnerable, like widows and orphans. Remember, back then, women often didn't have their own income, so getting part of the inheritance, that protected them.
So it was kind of like a built-in safety net.
You could say that. And this idea of taking care of those in need, it goes beyond just your immediate family. Hadith 2123 makes this really interesting comparison. It says that freeing a slave when you're dying is like giving a gift when you've already got everything you need.
Is it saying that it's better to be generous while you're still alive?
It definitely suggests that. Like, giving means more when you're still here, when you could be using those resources for yourself,
Yeah.
It makes us think about why we give in the first place.
So it's not just about making a big show in your will. It's about being generous all the time.
Yeah, making it a habit. It's about seeing that real wealth isn't just what you have, but how you use it to help others.
Powerful stuff. It goes back to that idea of legacy, right? It's not just about what we leave behind, but how we affect the world through what we do and the choices we make.
Absolutely. And that brings us to waqf, which is basically a charitable endowment. It's a big deal in Islamic tradition. It's how people can set aside some of their wealth to support something that benefits the whole community, like a mosque, a school, even a hospital.
So it's like setting things up so your generosity keeps going even after you're gone.
Exactly. And these endowments can last for generations. They provide support and create a legacy of giving that really lasts.
That's amazing. It's like your positive impact keeps spreading.
It really is. It's about the idea that wealth can be a force for good
Right.
when it's used in a smart and purposeful way.
This whole conversation makes me think about how these teachings from so long ago still matter today.
Rare.
Are these principles actually being used in Muslim communities around the world?
Oh, absolutely. Islamic teachings about inheritance and charity, they're woven into so many Muslim societies. Like, take zakat. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
It's a required form of charity. Muslims have to donate a percentage of their wealth to help those who need it. It's a powerful system for spreading wealth around and promoting social responsibility.
So it's not just about individual acts of kindness, it's baked into the faith itself.
Exactly. And this focus on the well-being of the whole community, you see it in a lot of parts of Islamic life, like Islamic finance, for instance.
Yeah.
There are rules against crazy interest rates, and it encourages investments that help society as a whole. It's about using wealth to do good.
It's amazing how these principles can be used in so many different ways. It's like they give you a way to live ethically and also be really engaged with the world.
I like that. It's about understanding that what we do has consequences, not just for us, but for everyone around us and for the people who come after us.
You know what's interesting? Even though these teachings are from a specific religion, it feels like they have a lot to say to everyone, no matter what they believe. The focus on kindness, compassion, and helping others, that resonates with a lot of different ethical systems.
I totally agree. These principles, they go beyond any one religion or culture. They speak to our shared humanity and the fact that we're all connected.
With all this talk about ethics and the spiritual side of inheritance, are there also specific rules in Islam about the practical stuff, like how to actually make a will?
For sure. Islamic law, called fiqh, it goes into detail about all that. It lays out who can inherit, what percentage different heirs get, and the rules for making or changing a will.
So there's a whole legal system to make sure inheritance is handled fairly and follows Islamic principles.
Exactly. And this system has changed over time to deal with new challenges and how society changes. It shows how Islamic thought can adapt to different situations.
So even though these hadiths are centuries old, they still guide Muslims today when they face these complicated issues.
They absolutely do. And they offer valuable lessons for anyone who wants to think about how we can approach inheritance, wealth, and legacy in a way that benefits not just us, but everyone around us.
This has been a really insightful deep dive. It's amazing how much there is to explore in these teachings.
It's been great delving into these ideas with you.
You know, thinking about legacy and leaving the world a better place makes me wonder, what would Prophet Muhammad's will have been like if he'd written one? What kind of example did he leave for his followers?
That's a great question, and it brings up a really important point. The Prophet Muhammad, even though he was a leader and a spiritual guide, he didn't collect a ton of wealth.
Yeah.
He lived simply, focused on his mission and the well-being of his community. He did. It really makes you think, what do you want to be remembered for? How did you make the world better?
It's like a whole different way of looking at things. We usually think about inheritance as what we get, but maybe it's more about what we give, right?
That's deep. And Islamic teachings really encourage us to see inheritance that way. It's not just stuff, it's knowledge, values, good deeds that we pass down.
So it's like building something that lasts longer than we do, becoming part of something bigger.
Exactly. We're part of this chain that goes way back, and it keeps going long after we're gone. What we do can shape that chain, make the world better or worse.
This whole deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I get wills and testaments in a whole new way now. It's not just legal stuff. It's about ethics, about spirituality, about how we handle wealth, legacy, and our responsibility to everything around us.
Glad to hear it. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
And to everyone listening, we hope you keep thinking about these things. How do they fit with what you believe? How can you live by these principles no matter your background or faith?
These teachings are full of wisdom. They can inspire us all to live lives that have more meaning, that make a real difference.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. And until next time, may your search for knowledge and understanding keep lighting your way.